Welcome.
Thanks. Hi, everybody. So my name is Michael Quarshie, and given my blonde hair, blue eyes, I am Finnish. My mom's Finnish. My dad's from Ghana. Our company is based in Helsinki, but we also work in the US. And so I'm going to talk about data, but a little bit from a different angle than what has been discussed previously and what you might think about. So I'm going to talk about how to use data to drive health, environmental, and social impact. And the clicker started running. Here we go. Through AI-based nutrition coaching. And there have been some really good discussions here in terms of how do you tackle some of the ecological and ethical questions that are related to meat consumption. But the health aspect of that actually has been left aside. So I'm going to focus a little bit more on that as well, because it has implications as to how do we drive the price point for plant-based product and clean meat products down. One quick interesting fact, over the next 50 years, we're going to consume as many calories as we've consumed in the past 10,000 years. And so when we think about that, how do we consume, or how do we produce this food? It's obviously a huge question that you all know about and which you're here to tackle. But when we start thinking about what drives our behavior, as Brad mentioned earlier, it's fairly complex. A lot of things influence our decisions, which is basically when we buy foods, they're system one decisions. So we look at taste, price, convenience, and we take what's easy and what's convenient for us. But when we start thinking about how many food-related choices do we actually make in a day, just by show of hands, how many people here think that we make anywhere from 0 to 50? Just show your hand if you think that's the right range. A couple hands, 50 to 100, 100 to 150. That's starting to be the majority. 150 to 200, and then over 200. We make over 220, actually, conscious and subconscious food-related decisions on a daily basis. And so, just like Brad mentioned, it's mainly driven by system one thinking, but there are other things that influence our decision making as well. And that's really important to consider when we talk about changing people's eating behavior, which is what we focus on. So our company is a digital nutrition coaching platform, mainly for professionals. And so what we do is we use artificial intelligence to help people change their behavior. We analyze meals, but we also look at how can we help them make decisions. And a lot of times it's not based on simply analysis. A lot of times it's about providing them with insight and helping them understand how can they make changes in their eating behavior. And the way we do this is we have a database of millions of meals, and when users upload a meal, it gets analyzed with deep neural networks. Professionals still have a chance to look at it and change the suggestions that are made, which is very important. The reason why it's important is because if you try to analyze the content of a meal and relate it to the person's health goals, it's actually quite complex, and you have to understand what the user is trying to do. And so eventually this will be fully automated, but at the moment it's actually assisted by professionals that end up training those neural networks simultaneously. And to understand where this fits in the bigger space, we wanted to kind of show you the landscape because there's so many companies here. So I think it's good to understand that when we look about what type of categories of food tech companies and what spaces are there, there's the production level, there's the processing of food, the transportation, the infrastructure, storage, then there's the retail side, and then you have on the verticals reduction in food waste, access to food, and then the environmental factors. And it looks like the slides have compressed a little bit, so a lot of these should be over here a little bit, but we kind of fit here in the nutrition, health, education space, which is very important because while people make system one decisions, you can still influence that decision making very heavily. So usually people tend to act very quickly, but when they have a health problem and when they're really motivated to make a change, then they will pay attention. And the reality is that if you're diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, or for example, a gene test tells you that you have risk of heart disease, those are things that scare people and wake them up, which is why people buy coaching services. And so by also bringing the price point of those coaching services down, you can have a big impact. And so like I said, the slides are being distorted on the Mac, but these should be here on the left-hand side. So this is the space that we occupy, and it's important to think about how will this ecosystem that helps produce and transport the food that we eat, how can we collaborate, and how can data help in driving us in a direction that's healthier for us and also better for the planet. Now, what do we mean with data? So this is actually a sociograph of one of our groups. This is actually a group of athletes who won a medal over at the Rio Olympics. And what you see over here is the key decision maker and the influencer for that group. So people's decisions are not simply based on what is convenient for me and what do I like. Other people influence my decision making. And so we can actually track that. So the interesting thing about healthy eating is healthy eating has proven to be contagious. If you're in a group where people eat healthy food tends to look good. It's colorful, whole grains, plants, etc. When you compare that to processed food, which is usually brown, gray, and really not great contextually, it clearly looks better. And the interesting thing is that we see people consume more fruits and vegetables when they belong to a group where the influencer of that group makes those decisions. So we actually run different programs. So we have professional athletes, celebrities, work with kids, for example, from a local YMCA or other programs. And we see that these influencers and decision makers really drive that behavior. Now, why is that important for the people in this room? Well, it's because we can use that as a way of driving behavior on a large scale and on a societal level. So by individuals who make a conscious choice to make certain decisions and then to show it to others, that can be something that influences and drives behavior, and that can be tracked. I'm happy, by the way, to talk more about how we're using this in healthcare afterwards, but I'm going to move on right now. This does show a more detailed level of individual groups. And the reason why this becomes important is you also start identifying individuals who are falling off. So when we talk about behavior change, when we talk about food, we can't talk about food without talking about individuals and people and what drive people's behavior. And although we're a tech company focused on nutrition coaching, actually behavior change is a really important part of what we do. It's not just analysis. So this actually shows a small municipality in Finland, and again, it's cutting off, I don't know if there's any way of reframing it, but it's cutting off the results, so there's actually significant weight loss in 5 months, improvements in various types of biomarkers. And so what's really interesting in this picture is the fact that we actually have the ability of combining the individual diets of people in various interventions with their general activity levels and other metrics that we collect. And so again, from a data perspective, I'm sure a lot of you work with different companies that collect data in different ways. There's a huge opportunity in connecting data from different sources. And currently what we're doing with that is actually building more efficient interventions. So when we talk about behavior change, what our real interest is not necessarily the individual. We need to understand the individual, but our main focus is on driving behavior change on a population level. Because when you move from an individual level to a population level, you start realizing how small things have a big impact. If you get a big population, for example, to consume more fruits and vegetables, that reduces the risk for a number of chronic conditions in a significant way and brings up savings in the healthcare setting. So we're currently modeling, for example, one intervention that's been proven with an 8-year tracking time that a 415 investment in the intervention produced 5,770 euros in savings. And our medical director and our chief behavior scientist who actually ran this program and are now building a new one are helping us structure this as a social impact bond. And the reason why this is important to Brad's previous point is once you can start showing the health benefits of shifting to a healthier diet, and you can track that in the healthcare system, you now have a compelling argument for starting to do various type of policy changes that actually help drive that price down. Because we're currently subsidizing a lot of food products, it makes a lot of sense to subsidize healthy food choices. Now, a lot of you probably read this article previous weekend, and given how many discussions there were here in terms of switching to plant-based diets and the environmental benefits, etc., I'm not going to talk about this topic at all, but I will move on to this next one, so hopefully we'll catch up on time. But I wanted to also point out what we're using data for in a larger context. In addition to helping automate the coaching process, the one thing that we're currently doing is we're also using it to automate how people order food. So helping actually take the impulses that drive a lot of our eating out of the equation. So we're working with a food grocery chain in Finland, and actually a company that's going to present tomorrow, Meals, on using our data from the individuals and their health goals to use that to optimize their shopping cart. Because once you step in a store, there are so many things in there that trap you as a consumer to buy different foods that aren't necessarily healthy, just so the store can increase their revenue. Being able to avoid those pitfalls is a really important thing in helping people make those healthy choices. Not only that, but it also solves a really big problem, which is the convenience and the price factor. A lot of people think that healthy eating is expensive, which it's not, but you do have to spend time understanding what's in season and potentially how to prepare foods that aren't familiar to you. And so by automating that process and making healthy eating as easy and affordable as possible, that's a key issue to tackle if we want to make that the default option for the users. Thanks. I'm going to be here afterwards, and yeah, I'll hand it over to Johan. Thank you.